What keeps you up at night? If you are at or close to retirement age, chances are the answer is health and money. The world today is tumultuous, and that goes double for the stock market. So, how do you know if you have enough resources to cover your increasingly long lifetime? Just in time for Financial Literacy Month, we are going to get smarter about our investments. Stay tuned to find out how to future proof your retirement earnings. Welcome to Seniority Authority, the podcast where I track down experts to answer your questions on aging. I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey. Let's get smarter about growing older. Welcome to Seniority Authority. I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey. I am so thrilled to have Tom Sedoric, Executive Managing Director, Wealth Manager, and D. Casey Snyder, Managing Director, Wealth Manager of Steward Partners and Principals of Clove Hitch Advisors on the show today. Both of these gentlemen are recognized by Forbes magazine in 2023 and 2024 as best in state wealth advisors. Tom and Casey have shared their knowledge, not just with their clients, but also through articles in the Wall Street Journal, CNN Money, Financial Times, Dow Jones Money, and more. Tom brings 40 years of client service, and Tom and Casey's team has been recognized for excellence in their work with clients. Clove Hitch Advisors is based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I'm happy to say I've known Tom for 40 years and Casey for 17 because he is so much younger. Tom and Casey, thank you so much for joining Seniority Authority.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I am so thrilled. And everyone who listens to the podcast knows we don't provide financial advice, but we do help people get smarter about growing older. And that's one of people's biggest concerns. Most everyone listening today has some kind of financial plan. But what do you think people get wrong most often about their planning?
So, Kathleen, I think there are many things that people miss out on or sometimes don't think about till after the fact. But you wrote a wonderful piece a number of weeks ago for Humble Dollar talking about, I know your blind spots, and we know our clients' blind spots too. And I think one of the things that we most note is that people are not thinking about how they can make luck happen for them, right? Luck is when you have preparation and opportunity. You need those two components. But many people don't think about that, and they're planning for the future.
Now, Tom, you've talked with me before about your ability to do what you call seeing around the corner for clients, which I love. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, we try and anticipate things that our clients may not be thinking about. They're living their lives, but we have, as you said in the opening, we have 40 years of experience. You add up the team's expertise, and there's close to 100 years of experience helping people navigate various life changes. And one of the ones that comes up is, oh my goodness, what am I going to do when I'm old and I can't take care of myself? Or what am I going to do when I'm just old and don't want to deal with this big house? And we try and help people anticipate things well before they occur, including some of the tax preparation that's really off people's radar, but needs to be.
That's something that you both have been working on for, as you said, 40 years, and the team collectively, you've been doing this for a really long time. So you both have knowledge of typical ways people act that we're not even aware of. Casey, you were talking to me about something that you called the inherent optimism bias, which, being an optimist, I am very happy. But tell me what inherent optimism means.
Well, so I read a book back in 2012 called The Inherent Optimism Bias, and it's by Tali Sharot. And it talks about how we are all pre-programmed with this optimism bias and how it's really important for most of society. It's why we have children. It's why we start businesses. It's why we invest in education and innovation. It's the belief of a better tomorrow. And it's really helpful, except for at times when it comes to financial planning. And that's because this inherent optimism bias, we all sort of begin to think of our lives as being linear, this pretty consistent trajectory. We recognize the challenges and the speed bumps and the curveballs and others. We know it happens, but it's really difficult for us to account for that objectively within our own plans and our own actions.
So we just think it's going to get better and better and better, which is
for us, but not for everyone else, just for us. That's kind of that's the catch.
And Tom, you also mentioned something called the recency bias. What does that mean?
Yeah, recency bias it's probably a corollary to what Casey talks about, which is optimism bias, which is we think that the past is just going to continue on as it has recently. And therefore, what happened more recently, which is the stock market's always going to go up, is going to continue. Well, that may not. And we've seen many times where recency bias can undo somebody's what they thought was a well thought out plan until things don't quite go exactly as they had in the last 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden there's a fire drill.
And I also think people use the recency bias to believe that their life is not going to change, that the next 10 years are going to look just like the last 10 years. And we all know that's not true, but it's a challenge that people have when they think about planning to be older. Casey,
absolutely true.
Why should financial advisors collaborate so closely with accountants and other people? One of the hallmarks of Clove Hitch is that you and Tom and your team work really carefully with estate planning attorneys and accountants. Why is that important?
For a couple of different reasons, Kathleen. It's a good point. And it's that our lives are ever changing, and so too is the tax code and estate planning rules and regulations. When it comes to taxes in particular, taxes are our life's greatest expense, period. And so if we don't account for taxes really during every stage of life, then we really aren't trying to or aren't optimizing one's balance sheet. And if you think about, it's not just about tax efficiency, which is trying to save on tax dollars. And this kind of circles back to something that you mentioned, Tom, and that you mentioned, Kathleen, about looking around corners on behalf of others. The tax code is always changing. We don't know how it will change. We don't know when it will change, but we really try very hard with the help of the accounting community to help our clients create tax flexibility. And that's a matter of when you move into those distribution years, having the flexibility to be able to pull from one area of the balance sheet versus another, depending on how the tax code evolves. And if you don't have tax flexibility, it takes a long time to create this, which is why working with the accountant is so important during those accumulation years. And then also during those distribution years, it really is a team effort all the way around from beginning to end.
I don't know many people that want to dig into the tax code. And in an earlier conversation, you both had said that the tax code used to be like this and now it's like this. So you really have to deal with people that know what's going on.
There was a tenacious reporter at the Wall Street Journal a few years ago, Kathleen, that found out that I knew something about CCRCs. So this interview developed, and I think it was 2014, if I recall. And the fellow called me 5 or 6 times. So he was excited about tax planning and the importance and what we could save clients because of these unique aspects that Casey just mentioned about how the tax code evolves. And people should use it in their planning for their advanced years.
So that's one thing to really check in on. Are your financial planners collaborating with your accountants? Are you paying attention to this? Because it can make a big difference.
People usually don't know of the problem until it's too late. You don't know what you don't know until suddenly you find out. And it's usually a number of years afterwards. So that's why it's so important to collaborate up front, the strategy, the thoughtful planning within context.
I think that's a really important point because we want to make sure people get on the right track as soon as possible. And Tom, you've been doing this for a while. What do you find is the biggest challenge with your retirement age clients who have saved and have taken your advice? What's the big rub when it comes to older adults?
I'm glad this is visual so I can use my hands to describe something because it's a very simple graph. Your need for resources and need for assistance starts to go like this. About the same time, your ability to manage that starts to go like this. And this gap between your needs and your capacity, and we may not want to recognize it, but this gap needs to be filled by something. It's either going to be filled by a person, a family member, or an organization, an institution. And if we delay recognizing that need and that gap that's going to develop, sometimes our choices get taken away from us. And most of us don't like that.
That is very true. Here we say, if you want a choice, use your voice, but you need to be able to have that conversation about what your choices might be before it becomes a crisis.
Absolutely.
What do both of you feel are one or two things that you would recommend to our listeners to ensure they have a stronger financial future?
Kathleen, you already mentioned it, which is kind of an exercise about thinking about our last 10 years, all of our last 10 years, and all the change that has occurred within our lives, whether having to do with us personally or directly or variables beyond our control, and then thinking about all the change to come. And a lot of people struggle with applying all the change of the last 10 years and kind of forward thinking ahead and saying, okay, all that could change. And then coming back to one's plan and stress testing it, thinking about it from different angles. What happens or what if? Are we okay? Does our plan only hold up if everything goes according to plan? Because if that's the case, there's probably some trouble ahead. You just don't know where it's coming from. So it really is a matter of being thoughtful, thinking outside the box, kind of understanding that inherent optimism bias and having somebody else come in and maybe assist you with that.
And Tom, what would your recommendation be?
Sure. My addition, I guess, or augmentation would be have the conversations early. Start conversations with your family members early, with the professionals that know about what your options might be later on. Many people don't know what's even in their backyard when it comes to retirement options or communities or support teams or structure that's around. And they don't have the discussion until all of a sudden there's a fire drill and they're going like this and, oh my God, I got to do something. Whereas if you have a conversation with your family and your team early about what your hopes and dreams are, you'll be amazed how they will all come to bear and give you what you want. But if you don't discuss it, they're not going to know. And there's this terrible taboo about talking about planning and money and all these things. It's our worst enemy many times.
What is the conversation opener that you recommend to your clients when you talk about this? Because it is taboo and so many futures would be different if people could have this conversation. What do both of you use to open this up?
I mean, it's different for everyone. Sometimes it's a matter of just candidly asking, hey, who would you call if you were unable to drive? Or if someone broke a hip? Or kind of using one's life within context, but who would you call? What is the plan? Literally, who is to call who, and are you prepared for that? Sometimes it's cutting right to the chase, and then all of a sudden there's this large conversation that unfolds in a really productive way because usually people have thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, though, they've never talked about it. And then you have this 45-minute, hour and a half long discussion. Everything's on the table, and now you have a roadmap to be able to help somebody with and actionable steps from that point on to be able to help them in a proactive way.
Yeah, I think about, anniversaries and events. Financial Literacy Month is fast approaching. So we'll think about how we can get our families to talk about our plans, what we want to do. We've talked to our kids about Barb's and my plans and where we want to be and who we want to have take care of us, et cetera. We share our tax returns. Those discussions have to happen early so that you avoid the fire drills later on.
I would like every listener to just take a minute and think about that. You can have this conversation with your financial advisor, with your children, but you have to have the conversation. If there is only one thing that you take away from a year, 2 years, 3 years of listening to Seniority Authority, that is what I'd like you to take away. Have that conversation. Take it from these super smart financial gurus. This is what you need to do for your future, period. Because a lot of times what you think and your children think are different. Or you may think you have enough money to stay at home and bring in care, but do you know how much that care is going to cost? Do you need to do the homework if you want to live the way that you prefer? So I think that's really important. One of the questions that I often get is, how much money do I need for retirement? As we all know, we're living longer than we typically expected. I have a 91-year-old mom who's like, I didn't plan to be here. How do you answer that question, Casey and Tom? Is it, if you spend X in your average life, you need 10X for retirement? I know it differs for every single person, but what's your best advice on that?
I would say that everyone's an expert in their own way from a mental accounting perspective, but it doesn't count until you write it down. So having it written and using financial planning and a sophisticated program for financial planning helps provide the context that you need to answer that complicated question. There used to be the rule of 4% or the 4% withdrawal rule. Well, sometimes that has changed with the era of low interest rates that we just experienced. But it's such a unique number to everyone's circumstances and situations, depending on how they're spending, what's important, family dynamics, etc. Write it out, model it out over the next 20 to 30 years, and then stress test it for life's unexpected events that only happen to your neighbors and friends and not you. Okay.
Your house won't burn down
Right? Exactly.
as Casey's did. You can't make it up.
And your number is unique to you. And then that is your benchmark. That is what you aim for. Forget about all the noise. Focus inward on what matters to you based on your own goals, equation, longevity, etc.
Yeah, I think about how my career has evolved in 40 years. In the early days, it was about the investment side and whether you own XYZ or ABC and trying to make everybody wealthy. Well, for the most part, most of our clients are quite well off and can provision themselves for whatever comes down the pike, but they may not be discussing it. And to Casey's point, they may not be planning around it. So one of the things that's happened for us is in the last 15 years, we have two, not one, but two CFPs on the team. Casey's one of them. And they bring a lot of value to our clients because it's much more about the planning and the resilience of that plan. Can it withstand a healthcare event? Can it withstand a fire drill with, if you fall and break your hip and your kids live on the other side of the world? All those things that can happen and do happen because we've seen it happen. Do you have a plan and do you have somebody who can help you execute it? And that's why we have two very qualified CFPs to do that.
Which are certified financial advisors.
Thank you. Sorry for the jargon.
No, just clarifying. And Tom, you're not only future-proofing your retirement and your clients' retirements, but you're also future-proofing the organization that you created. How are you doing that?
Well, we had a dear friend of mine who was in our profession after a very esteemed career in public service. And he died suddenly, and he left quite a mess. He had clients that didn't know who was taking care of their money. He was a sole practitioner. And it made me think about my own longevity and my own mortality. And one of my colleagues at the time, she kind of looked me pretty sternly in the eye and said, "What's your plan, Tom?" So it was at that stage where I realized that this is 12, 13 years ago now, that we have responsibility for people's plans, their finances, and their futures, quite honestly. And if I dropped dead, it would have been, I'm sure everybody been terribly sad, but it would have been hugely disruptive. If I dropped dead today, and I'm not planning on it, but the median age of my team, with me at age 70, the median age of our team is just around 42. That's an investment in our clients,
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
families, to make sure there's continuity, that if something happens to the old guy, they have succession in place. And sadly, many professionals in our profession do not have succession in their works.
The shoemaker's children, kind of.
Yep.
And they always say choose a young lawyer and a young financial advisor, someone who is going to be there for a long time.
I'm still relatively young to my 90-year-old clients,
Yes.
but I remember my 30s and 40s being quite young to my 60-year-old clients. Well, that's no longer the case.
Yeah. But having that diversity of ages and stages, and you have a lot of collaboration, your team is really incredible for how much you share together. I think it's really rare to see meetings where everyone in the team is a part of that and interacting and learning together. That's really important.
Well, and a lot comes out of that both ways. You've heard the term mentoring, and we talk a lot about reverse mentoring. I probably learn more from Casey and the younger team members than they learn from me at this stage.
I want to ask, you mentioned Humble Dollar, and that's a phenomenal website. I'm very pleased to have been introduced to it by you and Jonathan Clemens. What other media outlets do the two of you look to for financial advice, guidance? What do you feel is worthwhile in this very noisy world of media?
My primary go-to amongst many, now more blogs than publications, I'll say that, but still my go-to is The Economist, which for many can feel thick. It's like reading a dictionary on a weekly basis, but still find it to be of incredible value. And because of how comprehensive it is, it gives you a lot of flexibility and options in terms of what to read.
I used to be a huge Dow Jones fan. I'm less of that now since Mr. Murdoch acquired all the Dow Jones outlets, Barron's and Wall Street Journal. So now my primary reads in the morning, in addition to The Economist, which is more or less, it's not a daily publication, but it's Bloomberg and the Financial Times of London. Those are the two things I feel like I have to read to be in the know. And the New York Times is still one of the best publications out there. Even though it's not a financial publication, it has a lot relating to our profession that are very helpful.
Well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time today away from your very busy schedules, from your clients, to share some really important information to all of our listeners. We'll be mentioning the different outlets that you talked about in the show notes. Thank you very, very much for sharing this really important information.
Thanks for having us, Kathleen.
Thanks, Kathleen.
That's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to Seniority Authority. I always want to hear from you. Email me at info@seniorityauthority.org. And if you like the show, please share it with a couple of your friends so that we can all get smarter about growing older. Till next time. That's our show for today. If you liked it, please tell your friends so we can reach more minds and keep the conversation going. Or follow us on social at Seniority Authority. I'm Cathleen Toomey. Until next time, enjoy your chance to get smarter about growing older.